Before I get into spraying large sections of the bodywork of the 1980 Opel Kadett historic rally car, I want to do a few smaller projects just to get back into practice with spray painting. I'm going to start by doing the front struts. I also want to get at least the parts that the car needs to become a rolling shell again, so I can get it back on the ground as soon as possible after respraying it. This means I'll be able to move it around and maybe do some other parts of the project in the space where the car is. Even just moving it forward and back would be a help. So this is a strut assembly which was just put on the Kadett to get it going. It's fairly rough, very hungry for paint. I won't be using these springs again. I've got new springs to go on the car. So just took some of the tension off with the spring compressors there for safety, but not too much, so that I could undo this main bolt. It needs a little bit of the spring tension on it so that the piston on the damper doesn't spin. So I loosened that off, and now I can compress the springs further and release the tension on that cap and remove it. The tension from the spring certainly kind of transfers to yourself when you're working with this. It's a dangerous enough operation. So that popped off a little bit, and now I have the spring removed. You can take the pressure back off these. You'd want to be standing back from all of this and don't put yourself in the line of fire if the spring was to let go, if one of the compressors was to slip. I wouldn't like to be there when a spring broke, and as this does actually happen on cars, it's happened to me, and I've certainly seen it happen to a few friends over the years. Yeah, always happier to get the spring uncompressed. Now, that's the only tool I have for taking out this damper, and going to need a bit of body weight on that. Different dampers going into this car as well. These always look like new when you take them out, because that's fairly well sealed. I'll take off the caliper next. So it even has the dust caps still on it. They'll tap off to expose the Allen key bolt underneath. I'll drive an Allen key socket with my ratchet. One of the most popular ones that I use, so always a bit of grease on it, easy to find in the toolbox. Gonna need a bit more leverage than that though. You can see I'm not that used to using power tools all the time. I always think of the spanners and ratchets first, but that's the job for removing these, the impact gun. Put the bolts back and the dust covers on to hold them in there, and I'll be able to find all the bits when I recondition these and refit those calipers. That disc won't be going back on. And that hub has 3 of the studs from the donor rally car, where I've gotten a lot of these parts from. One of them broke more than a decade ago when I first was transferring wheels on or off that car, getting it moving. So I'm gonna knock out the hub, one side of that bearing. These are the ones with the two parts to them, but they're you get them as a single unit. There's a circlip here, a big one, to retain it. And I've a nice new circlip pliers set from Jefferson Tools via E Fox Engineers. And look at that. That's actually the right one, hopped out at me, ready to go. Won't work well with the clip in that position. Bit of lubricant there to help me free it up. I'll just tap it around with the screwdriver there and loosening it all the way around. That will also help for me to compress it once it's freed from the slot or groove that it goes into. But also now I've got an angle where I can get the pliers in and compress that, and again release the tension, both physical and emotional. There's one on the other side too, so I did the same work over there, and out that comes. So yeah, you can see the bearings from that chase over there. So I can knock the remains of this side of this bearing. Will obviously not be used again, so it's breaking up, and I'm just taking it apart in different sets. So now the surfaces that the bearings balls roll on, that casing is still in there, so I'm knocking it out using a big socket. That's out now. And I did the same job with the other strut assembly, and that bearing was actually holding together when I knocked the hub out of it. Keep all these clips, maybe not for the rally car, but I've got a few of these cars for road use as well. You never know when you might need a clip. I might even chance that bearing for a little while. So instead of wire wheeling these strut assemblies, I'm going to immerse them in Evapo-Rust. That's actually the Vantage Point Video Office waste paper bin, which I have taken into the garage, and I'm going to use most of 20 litres of Evapo-Rust on these. Look, I probably should have wire brushed the parts, but I wanted to really rely on the liquid and just see how powerful the product was, and yeah, saving time. So yeah, I've immersed it there, and only needing a little bit of the fourth 5 litres, and I'll leave these in. They say only needs about 12 hours. I just tend to do these things overnight, and because they don't fit all the way down in the bucket, I'm going to have to rotate them. So I'm actually doing this over a weekend while I wasn't doing any other work in the garage, and coming back the next day now, and I'm just going to turn them over. Trying to avoid a big drop back into the bin and a splash. Those caps will get a long time in the bath, but the liquid only eats and attacks the rust. Doesn't do any harm to the steel as far as I can see. I don't think you can leave it in too long, really. It's supposed to be safe with rubber parts, etc. It's a very, very interesting product, and it's quite safe to use, and it's even supposed to be, if it wasn't for the oil and grease that's gone in there, it would be safe to go down the drain, really. But you don't really need too much protective gear when using it. And it can be reused a number of times, so I'll be putting all that liquid back into the 5-litre containers for use again, and I'll be doing a lot of the parts of the car as they go on. So I'm going to make a little area in the garage where I can do some painting while the car is out in this area, so it'll be handy to have 2 different areas within the garage where different things will be going on. So this is inside my spray booth, which is opposite the bench where you would have seen me knocking out the bearing a few minutes ago. I rinsed these with water, and I'm just using a bit of degreaser on some flash rusting that occurred while they were drying. Putting some masking tape on that surface that the bearing gets knocked into, just so that the bearing casing isn't too tight to put in. Really, it's not a critical surface, I suppose. It is over time, because someday I'll probably want to take that bearing out again. I've put that cap in the bottom just to protect the threads again, so that you don't get too much paint on them. Fairly coarse threads on the bits where the calipers go on, etc., so not too worried about them. I might just be a little bit careful and run the bolts in and out a couple of times to clear the threads. When it comes to reassembly, I'm using an epoxy primer on here. I'm not really going to give you instruction in how to do paint. You know, there's different laws regarding private use. Like the work I do in my cars, this is not a professional garage, this is just my hobby. You'll have to research that stuff and take your own precautions. I'm breathing air fed from outside of the garage, but you take responsibility for any painting that you do yourselves, and do your own research. It's very satisfying to see the transformation in these parts, and looking forward to getting some top coats on them soon. But I'm going to leave them a good bit of time to dry before I do that, so that work will come in another video. And I am putting on 3 layers of the epoxy primer. These are going to be in a very harsh environment in the wheel arch, so I don't mind putting plenty of paint on. You could of course do this with rattle cans, but I want a bit of practice at mixing my paints, as I said at the beginning of the video, before I get on to doing some of the body work. It'll be nice when these are finished, fitting them to a shiny rally car.